West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
In the Trump presidency, Republicans finally succeeded in their machinations to stack the U.S. Supreme Court with hardline anti-abortion conservatives, and then they were able to get through the policy they most wanted. They overturned Roe versus Wade, and that allowed Republican-controlled states all over the country to ban abortion. And even those bans have not been enough for Republicans in many states. Republicans are now proposing in the state of Missouri, for example, that abortion be charged as homicide, that abortion be charged criminally as murder. Republicans in the Missouri House and the Missouri Senate are now proposing murder charges for abortion in legislation that they are bringing up this month. This comes after Republicans have proposed similar legislation in Kentucky and in Georgia and in Arkansas and in South Carolina and in Colorado. Republicans in all of those states have proposed murder charges for abortion, which usually, of course, means life in prison or even the possibility of capital punishment. In Ohio, a young woman is newly facing criminal charges for having had a miscarriage at home. They're bringing criminal charges against her, threatening her with prison for the handling of the fetal remains after she miscarried at home. And in Texas, the case of 31-year-old Kate Cox has played out over these last few days as a Republican fantasy of how they would most like to wield really, 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 really big government. Kate Cox is a mother of two. She's 31 years old. She very much has wanted a third child. She was pregnant with that third child when she learned that it would not be a viable pregnancy, a fatal genetic abnormality. She had already been in and out of the hospital with fairly serious complications in this pregnancy. Her doctor advised her that if she wants to be able to try again, if she and her husband want to try to get pregnant again, to try for another child, which they desperately want, this non-viable pregnancy must be ended by abortion in order to protect her health and potentially to save her life. But Texas bans abortion because Texas is a Republican-controlled state. So Kate Cox had to go to court to try to get an exception from Texas's abortion ban. And a Texas judge ruled late last week that she could have an exception from the abortion ban. She could get this abortion in this special case to preserve her health, to potentially preserve her own life. The Texas Republican Attorney General responded by writing to Kate Cox's doctor and to the Texas hospitals where the doctor has admitting privileges. Texas Attorney General threatening that he would potentially criminally prosecute them if they did the abortion, regardless of that Texas court ruling. He then filed an appeal with the Texas Supreme Court. The Texas Supreme Court only has Republican judges on it. And that all-Republican Supreme Court in Texas promptly agreed to hear the appeal. That stayed the lower court ruling. The practical effect of that is that Kate Cox was once again legally blocked from being able to get an abortion in Texas. And then the Supreme Court just sat on it and did nothing. They blocked the ruling allowing her abortion on Friday, and then they just sat on it all weekend and today. Who knows when they would have got around to finally making some sort of decision about it. She's already 20 weeks pregnant, right? She's been in and out of the emergency room at least 4 times with complications from this pregnancy, but no rush, guys. Today, Ms. Cox's legal counsel, the Center for Reproductive Rights, announced that Ms. Cox finally was effectively forced to flee. She left the state to go to some safer place where there isn't a ban like this one that Republicans have imposed in Texas. Nancy Northup, the chief executive for the Center for Reproductive Rights, which has been representing Ms. Cox in this case, said this. She said, quote, Kate desperately wanted to be able to get care where she lives and recover at home surrounded by family. While Kate had the ability to leave the state, most people do not. And a situation like this could be a death sentence. That was this afternoon. And now tonight, hours after that announcement from the Center for Reproductive Rights, hours after we learned that Kate Cox had to leave the state of Texas so she could get this abortion somewhere else, tonight, the Texas Supreme Court has nevertheless just issued its ruling in this case. They ruled that the lower court was wrong to give Kate Cox an exception to the ban. They ruled that Kate Cox effectively should have been forced by the government of the state of Texas to carry this pregnancy to term of a baby that would not live, despite the fact that doing so would risk her health, would risk her ability to ever have a child again, and potentially even risk her death. A government would compel that of her and her body, while the Republican Attorney General threatened criminal prosecution of anyone who helped her, in a state where the penalty for helping a woman in this circumstance is up to 99 years in prison. Because, limited government, freedom. Joining us now is Nancy Northup, President and CEO of the Center for Reproductive Rights, the group that's been representing Kate Cox in her case against the state of Texas. Ms. Northup, thanks very much for being here.
Good evening. Thank you for covering this.
Did I get any of that wrong?
No, unfortunately, you got it all right. I mean, just imagine as you went through what Kate went through this week. First, she had a terrible diagnosis. Then she had to go to court, plead in front of the court, in front of the world, right? Because it's on video, to get basic health care. The judge rules that she can, and yet, as you pointed out, Attorney General Paxton says, no, I'm threatening your doctors, I'm threatening the hospitals, and eventually she has to flee the state, as she did today. I mean, we're at the point in the United States where we have reproductive freedom states and we have reproductive oppression states. And one has to flee an oppression state to be able to get basic health care. But that's what Kate has gone through this week. It is unacceptable, but that is what we're living with in post-Roe America.
I know that Ms. Cox has left the state of Texas seeking care elsewhere. I'm not going to ask you, obviously, to disclose anything about the circumstances of where she is or what she had to do, but can you tell us if she's okay?
She's okay. She's had a really, really devastating time. I mean, as you pointed out, all weekend long, waiting and hoping that the Texas Supreme Court would rule that she could go ahead, as the district court ruled, having heard the medical evidence, that she could have the abortion in the state of Texas to preserve her health, to preserve her future fertility. And despite all that, that ruling did not come. It is just simply devastating.
What do you make of the ruling that they issued tonight? I did not know if the case would be considered moot and they would decide that they didn't have to rule once your office had announced that she had left the state and was obtaining the procedure elsewhere. They nevertheless decided to rule. Was that definitely going to happen either way? Do you have a reaction to their ruling?
I mean, the ruling did not give any more clarity and guidance to doctors about when they can perform abortions in the state of Texas. So we're right back into the place that we have been for a very long time. Courts not giving guidance. The state's medical board's not giving guidance. And Attorney General Ken Paxton is running around telling everybody that nothing qualifies under their exception. It also just shows how these medical, health exceptions that these states pass, saying, oh, no, we're compassionate, we have these health exceptions, they don't mean anything because nobody can access them.
This is a difficult question, and please tell me if I'm off base in asking it. But given what Attorney General Ken Paxton did here after that initial court ruling in Texas, going to the doctors, going to the hospitals where the doctor had admitting privileges, and threatening criminal prosecution of anybody who helped Ms. Cox and her family in this case. Is it possible that Ms. Cox and her husband could face like civil suits or charges? Are they potentially liable as Texas residents for somebody like Ken Paxton coming after them, even though they had to leave the state to get this done?
They absolutely should not be. We have a right to travel in this country. You have a right to go to another state and get health care and be under the laws of that state. So that would be extreme intimidation, and it would be a misuse of the prosecutorial authority of the state of Texas. But, you know, let's hope that does not happen. And people should know you can go to a reproductive freedom state and get health care that you need.
How does this case, I understand this is or correct me if I'm wrong, was this the first time that somebody has had to seek a court-ordered exception to an abortion ban? Was this the first time?
I think post Dobbs' decision, post the reversal of Roe versus Wade, it was.
It is Tuesday, the 12th of December of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunnar the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl. And she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash. A mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Always has, and it always will. That's how the spice trade works, and still does too, so yeah, bear with it. Yeah. Okay, so looks like Texas is a war on women state. Just one of them. I think Republican-controlled state houses and governor positions, you know, pretty much war on women. And I remember, back in the aughts, when I used the term war on women, and the more libertarian of our group, they would just be so irate. Now, these were the same guys that were going to, like, I'm sorry to tell you, but they were going to these men's groups to sort of, I don't know, give them a silo so they could whine about how they have it so bad with these crazy women who just want to do what they want to do. Why won't they do what I want them to do? Where? I don't know. They were like wine fest for guys. I went to one and I go, this is a wine fest for guys. What the hell? Deal with it. I thought we were guys. Okay? Grin and bear it. And maybe look inward a little bit. And if you're messing up, maybe you want to consider changing your behavior, because isn't that what guys do? They adapt. Right? And anyway, I guess that's when I first came to the conclusion that libertarians have nothing to do with being liberal. They are illiberal. They want to take rights away from people. Yeah, they want to have a toll for their, because, they own a house, right? So their property line goes like across the street, meets in the middle somewhere, like riparian rights. And they want to charge a toll for people to pass by. No public thoroughfares. Okay, wow. Public thoroughfares are commie. Oh, yeah, it's going to work. Going to work the way you want it. And now they've basically have extended it to people. Women. Toll. The original intent of our founders was to make women property. Really? What did Abigail Adams have to say about that? Mm-hmm. What about the little ladies? Well, I am sorry. I thought equal protection and due process for all meant all. Capital A-L-L. All. I don't know why that is so confusing. oh no, we can't give full rights to people who are here visiting from another country. Why not? That's exactly what we do. God, it just kills me. We can't give full rights to those illegal aliens. They're not illegal. They're asylum seekers. Yeah, that's what they'd like you to think. Okay. And this is from the same people who say that, I don't know, there's a baby trafficking ring on Etsy where they're trafficking kids right next to macrame candle holders. Crazy ass shit. I'm going to take it on advisement. But unfortunately, we have whole states run by people who believe this drivel. Holy hell. And before I get into what we have curated for you, let me just say this. There's a mistaken belief that the base of any political movement is the most virulent Al-Qaeda-like model. You know, like a MAGA Nazi. So there's this belief that the base of the Democratic Party is like the equivalent of the MAGA Nazi, which I don't know. The anti-Semitic Democratic Socialist. I have no idea what they mean by that. But that's not the base of the Democratic Party, and we all know that. The base of the Democratic Party is a bunch of centrists. Please. So when I hear the Ceasefire Now and Genocide Joe crowd say, hey, he's not making the base very happy. Actually, you know what? He's making the extremists in the Democratic Party extremely unhappy. But they are not the base. Let us be clear. Okay, that stated. What do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe as we begin on this fabulous Tarrytown Chowder Tuesday? I guess it's kind of fabulous when you have the Texas Supreme Court basically saying, well, I'm sorry, there's no exceptions to a woman getting rid of a kid. What? She's like 21 weeks old. The fetus is dead. Or will be. And she could be. There are no exceptions. It was all a ruse, and we knew it. So no wonder they're trying to keep people from voting, because people are going to be pissed, because they're more pissed now than they've been in a very long time. Had to get more off my chest. There. On the rest of the menu, advocacy groups want a full federal appeals court to revisit a panel ruling limiting the scope of the Voting Rights Act. Like I said, they don't want people voting. A Montana county will vote on removing election oversight duties from a Stop the Steal affiliated clerk recorder. And we're talking Montana, you know, that they're not full of Antifa liberals. Okay, let's be clear. And a Kentucky judge struck down a charter school's funding measure. Wow. He doesn't want to send money to a religious school. Isn't that? Actually, that's breaking news. A Kentucky judge. Okay, after the break, we move to the chef's table, where Poland's parliament elected Donald Tusk to come back as prime minister, following 8 years of stormy, white nationalist, conservative rule. And Austrian authorities arrested a 16-year-old who planned to attack a Vienna synagogue. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrutsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrutsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford, even in this time of, well, it's the holiday season and people have priorities, I know. But when you're able, if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us pay our bills and continue this powerhouse of resistance. We have found over these many, many years that if we pay our bills, we are somehow able to fly under the radar and continue on. And you just never know when they're going to crack down on us and use any flimsy excuse, and we won't give it to them. Not one bit. No, we won't. And we have you to thank because your generosity has allowed us to fulfill our civic duty over these many, many years, and also as the founders originally intended so many years ago. Yeah. Roundabout way, but I got there somehow. But regardless, and all kidding aside, we do thank you for your generosity, and it is heartwarming, and we will continue this powerhouse of resistance. Yes. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, we will never call it X. Maybe shitter. But for now, it'll still be Twitter. Also over on Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, except we all kind of take care of the Facebook page, kinda. You can also follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, not Telegram, Instagram, Instagram, Tumblr. There we go. I got that one in. I don't know. I'm not over on Telegram. Should I be? I don't know. That sounds scary. Threads, too. Some of them are a little bit, I don't know. You never know what they're up to. But you can find me mostly online everywhere at Justice Putnam or simply Justice Putnam. I do post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime for each of our shows, and you can get the actual full articles from the actual reporters who wrote the articles by finding them by way of the show notes and links diary. And you can find those once again by following me on all those social media platforms. Do it. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And also on Facebook at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And you can also, please do get or pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., just not on Stitcher. It's going to take a while for me to get over it. I'm just saying. Okay? A long while. Okay. This first offering is here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fabulous Tarrytown Chowder Tuesday. Is out of the Associated Press by Andrew DeMilo, or is it DeMilo, and Ayanna Alexander. Progressive advocacy groups in Arkansas yesterday, Monday, asked a full federal appeals court to reconsider a 3-judge panel's ruling that private groups cannot sue under a key section of the Federal Voting Rights Act. The Arkansas Public Policy Panel and the Arkansas State Conference, NAACP, I might take issue with calling him progressive. Liberal, but maybe progressive might be a pejorative now. Maybe. Well, they asked for the case to go before the full 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals after a panel ruled 2-1 last month that only the U.S. Attorney General can enforce Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The groups, which are challenging Arkansas's new state house districts under the law, told reporters in a conference call that the Ruling reverses decades of precedent. Yeah, well, you know how they feel about precedent. And when I say they, I don't mean us. I mean they. Well, and they would remove a key tool for voters to stand up for their rights if it is not reversed. It also would put future challenges at the whims of partisan politics, since the president nominates the attorney general. By jeopardizing private parties' ability to enforce the act, the panel decision threatens to make the promise of the Voting Rights Act hollow and should not be allowed to stand, said Sophia Lynn Lakin, director of the Voting Rights Project at the ACLU, which is representing the groups in the case. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act requires political maps to include districts where minority populations' preferred candidates can win elections. Lawsuits have long been brought under the section to try to ensure that black voters have adequate political representation in places with a long history of racism, including many southern states. Now, earlier this year, for example, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered Alabama's congressional maps be redrawn to boost representation for black voters in a case brought by private individuals and groups. I just want to make sure that we are able to speak up, speak out, and give those people voices that they need on what's going on in our community. Barry Jefferson, president of the Arkansas State Conference of the NAACP, said their votes are their voice. Now, the group said in their request, the last month's ruling conflicts with all three other appeals courts that have ruled on the issue. It noted that Congress has repeatedly reauthorized the Voting Rights Act without questioning the privately enforced cases. Well, I might argue that they're just doing it in steps. And now they're here. In a statement on Monday yesterday, Arkansas Attorney General Tim Griffin, a Republican, isn't that shocking, called the appeals panel's decision well-reasoned and said it correctly explained why only the federal government could bring lawsuits under Section 2, because these stupid people, the voters, what do they know? Well, the Circuit ruling applies only to federal courts covered by the district, which includes Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North and South Dakota. The group's request comes as Louisiana is asking the Fifth Court of Appeals to reconsider a different conclusion from one of his three-judge panels, which rejected the argument that there is no private right to sue under the Voting Rights Act. Ruling in a Louisiana congressional redistricting case, the Fifth Circuit panel said the U.S. Supreme Court so far has upheld the right of private litigants to bring lawsuits alleging violations of Section 2, as have other circuit appellate courts. Citing the Arkansas case, Alabama and 12 other Republican states last week asked the full Fifth Circuit Court to reconsider the panel decision. All but one of the Eighth Circuit's active appeals judges were appointed by Republican presidents, but advocates say they remain hopeful that the court would reverse the panel's decision in the Arkansas case. At the end of the day, this is a decision of 2 judges out of a circuit of 11 active judges, and 8 judges have yet to have their say, Lakin said. The groups are challenging Arkansas State Housing Redistricting Plan, which was approved in 2021 by the All-Republican State Board of Apportionment. The plan created 11 majority black districts, which the groups challenging the map argued was too few. They argued the state could have drawn 16 majority black districts to more closely mirror the state's black population. Republicans hold a majority in both chambers of the legislature and said, you'll be happy with 3/5, or you'll be happy with nothing. Beth Hansen of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Commissioners in a Montana county are expected to vote later on today, today being Tuesday, of course, on whether to remove election oversight duties from a clerk and recorder who expressed doubts about the integrity of the election process when she ran for office last year. The Cascade County Commission meeting was moved to the fairgrounds in Great Falls to accommodate the anticipated public participation. If the resolution passes, it would take effect immediately. Commissioner Joe Briggs proposed the resolution, noting that since Sandra Merchant was sworn in early this year, the county has received complaints about the way several local elections have been run. Lawsuits have been filed. The library board asked for court-appointed oversight for their mill levy election this summer. It's been everything from people getting or not getting ballots that should have to people who got ballots that should not have in these various elections. So there seems to be some systemic problems, Briggs said yesterday, Monday. The issue needs to be settled before next year's general elections, Briggs said. We need to get all of the issues identified and fixed before we get into federal elections because they do have broad ramifications, Briggs said. Now, I might just add here, this Joe Briggs is no flaming liberal. Please. Now, Democratic U.S. Senator John Tester is seeking re-election in a race that could help determine the majority party in the U.S. Senate. 2 U.S. House races will be on the ballot, along with all the major statewide elected races, including governor. The resolution proposes that the election oversight be removed from the clerk recorder's office and be assumed by the county commission, which would appoint an election administrator. State law allows for the change, and a handful of Montana's 56 counties have done so. Now, during the 22 campaign for clerk recorder, some Republicans asked the county commission to ask Democratic clerk Rena Fontana Moore to recuse herself from administering the election since she was on the ballot, Briggs said. She declined to step down temporarily, and Briggs proposed taking election duties away from the clerk and the recorder's office. However, none of the other 2 commission members would second his motion. Merchant defeated Moore by fewer than 40 votes in November of 2022, months after the Republican-controlled state legislature passed several laws it said were needed to improve election security. However, courts rejected those laws, saying the state brought no proof of the alleged widespread voter fraud the laws sought to eliminate. Now, let's be clear. The Democratic clerk recorder, administered an election in which she lost by fewer than 40 votes. And the Republican legislature wants to pass laws because they think that there's a lack of election integrity. Okay. Now, before Merchant took office, Briggs again moved to transfer the election duties to a non-elected administrator, and again, nobody else supported him. All 3 commissioners are Republicans. Things changed, however, as elections took place this year. It went from being basically a structural issue of someone in charge of an election that should not be on the ballot to broader questions about how things are being conducted here that did not exist previously, Briggs said. Merchant said after she took office, experienced employees in the elections department left without teaching her how to do the job. She argues Briggs' motion is disenfranchising the people who voted for her to run elections. Yeah, to cheat. Merchant campaigned on election integrity, supporting opening up ballot tabulators to make sure they are not connected to the internet or those weird Italian satellites, and hand counting of ballots as former President Trump brought baseless allegations that there was widespread fraud that caused him the 2020 elections. In the resolution, Briggs wrote that the county recently spent $200,000 on ballot tabulators and has received persistent criticism and concerns from certain members of the public who are politically aligned to the currently elected clerk recorder to the county's that the county's tabulators are Wi-Fi connected, capable of being manipulated by foreign governments or other nefarious actors, and that the only way to remove such fears is for Cascade County to open the tabulators for public inspection. However, doing so would void warranties and render the tabulators worthless, he said. Briggs said he made the motion to remove partisan politics from election administration and finds it a little ironic that it was Republicans who sought the change last year when a Democrat was in office and Republicans who oppose the change now. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Kentucky law aimed at setting up a funding method for charter schools was struck down by a judge yesterday, Monday, dealing another setback for school choice advocates. The decision stymies efforts for now to give charter schools a foothold in the bluegrass state, but it could further energize efforts to put a ballot measure before Kentucky voters next year that would seek to overcome constitutional hurdles for school choice initiatives. Such a proposed constitutional amendment would have to clear the GOP-dominated legislature before reaching the statewide ballot. Franklin County Circuit Judge Philip Shepard ruled that the 2022 law creating the funding stream for charter schools violated Kentucky's Constitution. Such publicly funded charter schools would be operated by independent groups with fewer regulations than most public schools. Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron's office said it's reviewing the ruling to determine their next steps. The measure was meant to pave the way for charter schools to open on a pilot basis while setting up the funding method. Democratic Governor Andy Beshear opposed the measure, but the legislature overrode his veto in what became one of the most contentious issues of the 2022 session. The bill's opponents warned that it would siphon money from traditional public schools. Supporters portray charter schools as a way to give parents more choices for their children's schooling. Yeah, well, the kids are already going to the private schools, and they want us to pay their tuition. No taxpayer money for private school tuition. Please. In his ruling, Shepard said the vigorous debate over charter school policy was not at issue. The only issue before him, he said, was whether the legislation ran afoul of the very specific mandates in Kentucky's Constitution that govern public education and the expenditure of tax dollars. Alrighty, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to networksradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. Even if you are a safe, experienced driver, accidents can happen at any time. Young children are especially at risk for injury and death in a motor vehicle crash. Dr. Erin Sauber-Schatz is a researcher with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of keeping children properly restrained in motor vehicles. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you.
Erin, how many children are killed or injured each year in a motor vehicle crash in the U.S.?
In 2013, 638 children aged 12 and under died in a crash, and over 127,000 were injured.
How effective have child safety seats and other safety devices been in preventing injuries and death among children?
Car seats and booster seats are very effective at preventing injury and death in a crash. But the most effective seat is the one that parents use to buckle their kids on every drive.
Where's the safest place for children to ride in a car?
The back seat is the safest place for children to ride in a car, buckled in an age and size appropriate car seat, booster seat, or seatbelt.
How long should a child ride in a safety seat?
Children should use a car seat until they're at least 5 years old, and a booster seat until the adult seatbelt fits properly. The adult seatbelt fits properly when the lap belt lays across the upper thighs, not the stomach, and the shoulder belt lays across the shoulder, not the neck.
Erin, where should parents go in their community to get help installing and using car seats?
Parents can get one-on-one help free of charge from a certified child passenger safety technician. You can find a tech near you at cert.safekids.org and click on Find a Tech. Another option is to check with your local police or fire department.
Erin, where can listeners get more information about restraining children properly in motor vehicles?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov and type in the search box, Child Passenger Safety.
Thanks, Erin. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Erin Sauber-Schatz about the importance of keeping kids safe in a motor vehicle. Remember, for children under the age of 13, properly restrain them in the back seat. If you're unsure about how to install or use car seats, check with your local police or fire department. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation
to netrootsradio.com. All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
If you thought that courts wouldn't try to further gut the 1965 Voting Rights Act, think again. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In 2013, the Supreme Court, 5-4, in a case from Shelby County, Alabama, killed more than half of the historic Voting Rights Act of 1965 by striking down what's called preclearance. Preclearance meant that a state or county with a long history of racial discrimination in voting had to get an okay, a preclearance, from a federal court or the Department of Justice before it changed its voting procedures. After the court killed preclearance, areas with racially biased voting histories closed polling places, purged voter rolls, truncated early voting, instituted racially biased voter ID laws, and so on. Then, in 2023, the Supreme Court, which has blessed blatant political gerrymandering in a clear case of racially motivated gerrymandering, did not strike down the rest of the Voting Rights Act. A big sigh of relief was warranted. But the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals has just ruled that private citizens and civil rights groups no longer can bring a challenge under the Voting Rights Act. If that case were to be upheld by the Supreme Court, it would gut what remains of that crucially important law. We await the High Court's decision. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by-in for the people. Just a week after a lower court upheld state House maps and ordered new state Senate maps, the Tennessee Supreme Court ruled for the second time that it would temporarily keep both partisan gerrymandered maps in place. In 2022, the GOP-dominated Tennessee legislature split and renumbered Davidson County voting districts in order to help protect its supermajority in the state House and Senate. Elections for even-numbered state Senate districts are held in higher turnout presidential elections, while odd-numbered districts are during the lower turnout gubernatorial midterm elections. The legislature intentionally gave 3 of 4 districts odd numbers in the heavily African-American county in violation of the state constitution. In 2022, a lower court threw out the map, but was blocked by the Tennessee Supreme Court, saying it was too close to the election. After the election, a lower court threw out the Senate map again, and again, December 8th, the Tennessee Supreme Court ruled to keep the gerrymandered maps in place for now. Tennessee's congressional map is also being challenged. Civil rights groups filed in federal court that breaking Davidson County into 3 congressional districts and splitting Shelby County's State Senate District 31 violated the Voting Rights Act by diluting black voting power. A date for that trial has not yet been set. We have links to analysis on these cases at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day that the United Mine Workers leader John L. Lewis wrote the AFL, stating, "We disaffiliate." Lewis had had a stormy history with the American Federation of Labor. He was central to the 1935 split that soon led to the founding of the Congress of Industrial Organizations. By 1942, he led the United Mine Workers out of the CIO. Reasons included disagreements over labor's relationship to President Roosevelt and U.S. entry into World War II and the running of the CIO itself. For a brief time, the United Mine Workers re-affiliated with the AFL. But by the fall of 1947, Lewis found himself in fundamental disagreement with the Federation over its response to the recently passed Taft-Hartley Act. At the October AFL convention, the discussion centered on the signing of anti-communist affidavits as required by Taft-Hartley. Lewis was virtually alone in his refusal to comply with the act. He noted that the act would have been stillborn if labor leaders had stood tall and refused to sign the affidavits. Further, he said, quote, "This act is a trap, a pitfall for organizations of labor. This act was passed to oppress labor, to make difficult its current enterprises for collective bargaining, to make more difficult the securing of new members for this labor movement, without which our movement will become so possessed of inertia that there is no action and growth. In a labor movement where there is no growth, there is no security for its existence, because deterioration sets in and unions, like men, retrograde." Despite the split, the United Mine Workers would remain a powerful, independent union for more than 40 years.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 49 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-50s, nearly the same as yesterday. Foggy conditions prevail at the moment, though we'll have partly cloudy conditions later on in the day. Winds will be light and variable. Partly cloudy skies overnight with lows in the low to mid-30s. Winds light and variable. Then mostly cloudy tomorrow with highs in the low 50s. Winds light and variable. Pollen is rated as none here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 33 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.14 inches. Visibility is less than a half mile, and relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 48 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 55 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 61 degrees and mostly cloudy. Bagram is 38 and clear. Kyiv is 29 degrees and cloudy. Hong Kong is 73 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 54 and cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 72 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 and they are under a dense fog advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 35 degrees and sunny with a small craft advisory. And New York is 41 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Donald Tusk, a leader of a centrist party, returned as Poland's prime minister for the first time in nearly a decade after a vote in Parliament on Monday yesterday, paving the way for a new pro-European Union government following 8 stormy years of white nationalist conservative rule. Tusk, a former EU leader who served as European Council president from 2014 to 2019 and has strong connections in Brussels, is expected to improve Warsaw's standing in the bloc's capital. He was Poland's prime minister from 2007 to 2014. Tusk's ascension to power came nearly 2 months after an election which was won by a coalition of parties ranging from left-wing to moderate conservative. The parties ran on separate tickets, but promised to work together under Tusk's leadership to restore democratic standards and improve ties with allies. The change of power is felt as hugely consequential for the 38 million citizens of the Central European nation, where collective anger against the Law and Justice Party produced a record-high turnout to replace a government many believed was eroding democratic norms. Well, not only a belief, they were. Law and Justice, which took office in 2015, increased its power over courts and judicial bodies, drawing accusations from the EU and others that it was eroding judicial independence. It also turned taxpayer-funded public media into a party mouthpiece. The vote was 248 to 201 in support of Tusk in the 460-seat lower house of Parliament, and they had no abstentions. Tusk is scheduled today to give a more substantial speech to Parliament, present his cabinet, and face a vote of confidence for his new government. He should then be sworn in by President Duda, a step scheduled for Wednesday morning.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff working the World Desk at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A 16-year-old teenager has been arrested for planning to attack a synagogue in Vienna, Austria's top security official said yesterday, Monday. The teenager, who was arrested on Thursday, had announced in online chats that he intended to procure a weapon to attack an unspecified synagogue in Vienna. Interior Minister Gerhard Karner said. He had already obtained the financial means for the attack, Austrian news agency APA reported. Officials did not identify the suspect. They said, though, that he lived near Steyr in northern Austria. His home was searched, and several electronic data carriers were seized. Authorities also found images and video material with instructions for making bombs, weapons, and ammo. Austrian authorities have beefed up security for synagogues and other Jewish and Israeli institutions following an increase of anti-Semitic incidents in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.